We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Sunday morning edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. My goodness, we got ourselves a lot to react to from just an insane Saturday in college football. And you already know we got, I don't even know, we whatever. We're going to have a lot to talk about. Let's just get right to it. This is what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss Bama, Georgia from both angles because I think, interestingly enough, is it more about Kalen Deboer getting that signature win? It might be, but also it might be about Kirby Smart. He just officially has a Bama problem at this point. There's nothing really else to say about that. From there, speaking of problems, James Franklin, he's great. As long as you're good. Then if you're good, you're kind of screwed. James Franklin loses another big one in the most crippling way possible. This is why I did not pick Penn State to win the national championship or even play for it, because I just had doubts that he could win the games that matter. And then we'll talk about the rest of what was a fun Saturday. Ohio State, I thought, with a very signature win. USC falls short again on the road. Do want to give credit to the BYU Cougars. Late night improved to 4-0 with a freshman quarterback. And let me also just say this. One game that we will not be talking about probably, Notre Dame and Arkansas. We did an instant reaction when Sam Pittman and the Hogs got slaughtered literally and figuratively in Fayetteville. We did that on Saturday. And as of right now, you could just go back and listen to that. However, we are on Pittman watch. And I don't think there's a 0% chance that he could be fired during the show. We'll obviously react if that happens. And then if he does get fired at some point today, and you don't root for this kind of stuff, but we have to be honest with ourselves, and it feels like it's time, we'll come back and do reaction at some point later in the day if this is, in fact, Sam Pittman's last morning as an Arkansas Razorback. We're recording here about 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central. Before we get started, couple quick reminders. One, make sure you're subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. If you're on YouTube, we surpassed 61,000 subscribers. I cannot believe we have reached that mark. Guess what? I think we can get to 62 before the end of the week. We cannot do it without your support, though. Make sure you're subscribed, turn on notifications, all that good stuff. Make sure you're also subscribed on Apple and Spotify if you are not already. By the way, in the chat, you see our Fox Sports Radio recap podcast is also live. You want to do your boy Torres a solid, help me out with the Fox Sports Radio bosses. Just download the pod. Just click the link, download it. You're really doing me a solid. All right. Also, before we get started, you know what I got to do? I got to thank our friends. I got to thank our partners. I got to thank the official ticketing partner of the Aaron Torres pod, SeatGeek and SeatGeek.com. So here's the bottom line is, you want to go to some games at some point, right? Maybe you're a Bama fan and you're fired up and you're ready to get to the stadium for Vandy this weekend. Maybe you're an Arkansas or Kentucky fan and you're just waiting for basketball. But at some point, you do want to go watch your team, right? Well, guess what? Where you need to go, how you need to get your tickets, SeatGeek and SeatGeek.com. Okay, this is the America's #1 ticketing app. Best part that I love about SeatGeek, they rate every ticket 1 through 10, give you a green dot or a red dot. Green means go ahead and purchase. Red dot means you may want to stay away from that one. That's for every ticket that's available. But you know what is also the best part about SeatGeek? They take care of listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. So this is all you got to do. Go to pick a game, any show, any concert. If they're selling tickets to it and if they're available on SeatGeek, all you got to do is go to SeatGeek.com. Use promo code Torres, Torres. You can see it on the screen. You get $20 off your first purchase. $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com. Promo code Torres gets you $20 off your first purchase. Darn it, we appreciate SeatGeek's support of the Aaron Torres pod. With that said, it is just an insane Saturday, insane Sunday in the world of college football. There's no more time to waste. Why would we even waste any more time? Let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, there was obviously two mega games that both started, interestingly enough, right around the same time. Both finished within minutes of each other. Again, I happen to be on Fox Sports Radio. For people who don't know, I host the National Recap Show every Saturday night. And so I was on air as Oregon Penn State comes down to the wire in double overtime, and Alabama gets the victory in Athens, Georgia. So let's go ahead and start there. And let's start with, what I think, I'll be honest, is just a sort of shocking result, not just because Alabama won, but in the manner that it happened. Final score, Alabama 24, Georgia 21. Alabama picks up what I would deem the single biggest win of the Kalen Deboer era. And I think conversely, it's time to officially have the conversation. Georgia, you got yourself a Bama problem. It is official, as Alabama now 8-1 against Georgia in the Kirby Smart era. Of course, conversely, Georgia is 1-8. So listen, we'll talk about the Georgia perspective in a minute, but to the victor go the spoils. And let's go ahead and start with Alabama. And listen, to me, listen, let me just put all my cards on the table, okay? I could sit here and lie. I could sit here and pretend that, maybe, there was a scenario where I could. No. Listen, if you listen to any of my shows, any of my platforms, if you follow me on any social media, I picked Georgia to win. And I'll tell you this, there's a tweet in my drafts where I basically was going to say, I think Georgia wins convincingly. I'm glad it's in the drafts, but Bama fans, let's be honest. I just think there were so many questions about this team going into this game. And I think conversely, there were two ways that you could look at the Alabama situation. You could sit there and say, 4 losses over the last 2 years against unranked teams. That obviously doesn't apply to Georgia. But more importantly, 4 losses away from Tuscaloosa. I believe the stat was Kalen Deboer 2-5 in games away from Tuscaloosa. Georgia, of course, conversely, with a 33-game win streak, and where 33-game home win streak, excuse me. And really where I stood on the Bama situation was this. It's great that you figured some stuff out against UL Monroe. It's great that you figured some stuff out against Wisconsin. But to me, it meant very little. And I don't want to say the whole season was going to be defined by what you look like against Georgia, but I think the whole season was in many ways going to be defined by what you look like against Georgia. It wasn't even about winning. It was about, can you go on the road? Will you be competitive for 4 quarters? If you get punched, will you punch back? And so I got to give Bama all the credit in the world, because I saw a lot of different scenarios in this coming into this game. Now, I saw the scenario where Georgia won, but the one scenario that I didn't see was Alabama basically dominating this thing from start to finish. Listen, I don't think just based on the stats of it all, you could sit there and say that Alabama absolutely dominated. I don't think you could sit there based on the box score, based on the final score of 24-21, and say that Alabama dominated. And I don't know that you can sit there and say that Georgia didn't have chances, and we're certainly, but here's the thing. When I look back at that game, Bama set the tone early and never let their foot off the gas. And as important as the win was, it was the manner in which they did it. This team, which has kind of ebbed and flowed, peaked and valleyed over the last, whatever it is now, let's see, 13, 17 games of the Kalen Deboer era, they came out, they dictated things. And I think as importantly, every time they punched and Georgia punched back, Alabama had the counterpunch. I mean, I think to me, this is going to sound weird because you could probably point to 2, 3, 4 defining plays in the game. I think Georgia not going for it on 4th down, we'll get to that in a minute, was certainly one of them. But I think conversely, the play to me that defined this game, you know what it was? It was that Caden Proctor, it was technically a lateral, so I think it was technically counted as a carry, but it was obviously a pass from Ty Simpson to Caden Proctor. And I just think that set the tone. We're not going to be bullied. We're not going to be intimidated. After Florida State put us on our heels and we never really kind of got back, never got our legs back, it was the exact opposite, where I think they put Georgia on their heels early and never really let up from there. And so when I look at this game, a couple things stand out. First of all, you can see the stats on the screen. Let's go ahead and give Ty Simpson some credit, man, because Ty Simpson, America was not familiar with your game, my man. Okay, so obviously, Alabama fans, if you don't know the meme, there's a famous Shaq meme where he says, I was not familiar with your game. Well, I bring it up because with Alabama, with Ty Simpson, listen, I think if you had been paying close attention, you knew how good this kid has been over the last couple games. And you know, by the way, going back to Florida State, that it wasn't really his fault that Alabama's offense struggled against Florida State. I blame that on Ryan Grubb. I blame it some on the offensive line. Whatever, Florida State is in the rearview mirror. I bring it up solely to say that when I look at Alabama, when I look at Ty Simpson, again, another guy, he had been good against UL Monroe and Wisconsin, a combined 41 of 46, but could he do it on the biggest stages? And the answer is unquestionably yes. Finishes the game. This is Ty Simpson, the Alabama quarterback, 24 of 38, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. And I'll say this, I hate doing the Heisman stuff in September and October. I think it's an award that's really defined by mid to late November. What are you doing? What is your team doing late in the year? But you start talking about Heisman candidates right now, Heisman favorites. Ty Simpson's got to be at the top of the list because he's not only playing well, but here is the other thing that really stood out to me about Ty Simpson is I think he's taking on a leadership role and a leadership role in that locker room that is, I can't say desperately needed because you just beat Georgia, but I think it's a very nice thing. And it's funny because we go back to earlier in the week. Remember Tuesday's show, we did reaction to that big Kalen Deboer sit down with Alex Scarborough. And Kalen Deboer said all the right things about I'm here to motivate my guys, and I've had to change my tone, and I've yelled and screamed and maybe dropped a few more 4-letter words than I normally do. But conversely, when I look at that situation, I sat there and said, you know, part of the problem is I don't know if guys in that locker room are stepping up as vocal leaders. Now, guys can be great in workouts, great in the facility, great in whatever, great in the community. But when push comes to shove, who is in that huddle screaming at dudes? We all remember, you know, A.J. McCarron and what was it, Barrett Jones a million years ago, screaming at each other in the midst of a national championship game, like holding themselves to a higher standard. And I just hadn't seen that from Bama through however many games against 17 of the Kalen Deboer era. Well, go back to Saturday night. There was a clip, I want to say it was maybe after Alabama even scored their first touchdown, where Ty Simpson walks to the sideline and just is in somebody's face and basically was saying to the defense, like, shut them down. We're doing our part. You do yours. And it may sound like a negative, but I'm not trying to say it as a negative. I'm trying to say it as an incredible positive of like, man, oh man, oh man. He was just letting people know this is the new standard. And I can't say how much I am impressed by him. Conversely, I'll say this. This was the biggest win of the Kalen Deboer era, okay? And I was thinking about this, a couple things. One, first of all, just have to give him credit because, listen, he's a highly compensated guy. You're not going to excuse the 9-4 last year. You're not going to excuse the Florida State game. But I think in hindsight, we can kind of sit there and say, okay, a couple things about Florida State. One, week 1, Florida State, entirely new coaching staff, entirely new roster. You're on the road. Gus Malzahn, it's tough to prepare for that, and Alabama fans know that better than anybody. 2, I think we also have to acknowledge there were some injuries that we probably didn't acknowledge enough at the time. Tim Keenan, one of their best interior defensive linemen, was out. By the way, he was all over the field on Saturday when I was watching that game. And so you have the Florida State game, but none of it matters if you don't go out and have the performance that you did against Georgia. And I was thinking about this in the lead up to the game. Listen, there's a scenario where if you're Alabama and you lose that game, you can still take some positives about it. But can you imagine what this show would be like? What every media outlet in America would be like if Alabama had gone to Georgia and it was like 24-3, 31-13, whatever. And so Kalen Deboer, I got to give him a ton of credit because I think this was the most important win of the Kalen Deboer era. And this is going to sound crazy. This could sound crazy because I know Alabama has won 6 national championships since whatever it is, 2009 or so. I think this is a program-defining win for Kalen Deboer and a program-defining win for Alabama. It sounds crazy, national championships, I get it. But I even go back to last year. Yes, Alabama had a couple nice wins. Let me ask you a question, though. And you can tell me that I'm crazy and that I'm wrong and I don't know what I'm talking about. I go back to last year, even that Georgia win, that kind of felt like an extension of the Nick Saban era. And I don't want to dismiss what Kalen Deboer did, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, it was like, Alabama enters that game 3-0. Nick Saban had kind of dominated Kirby. The game's in Tuscaloosa. It's mostly Nick Saban players headlined by Jalen Milroe. And it just felt like an extension of the Nick Saban era. It was just, I remember tweeting that day like, oh, I guess Alabama just has another great coach for another 30 years. Deal with it, everybody else. And then he had to go through adversity. He had to go through some lumps last season. And so for him to come out on the other side after 4 losses last year, after the season opening loss, I just think it's an unbelievable credit to him and just an unbelievable win for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I think it's the biggest win of his era. And I think it's a program-defining win because now you could say, we did it on the road. There's nothing fluky about it. We had struggled away from Tuscaloosa. No more. Lastly, let me say this. I want to go back to Ty Simpson for half a second because, again, to me, it's about winning a game, but it's about an attitude and mindset going forward. Again, and again, I don't mean to keep going back to last year, but the context matters. And you go back to last year, and there were highs and there were lows and there were peaks and there were valleys, and when you won, it felt good, but it just never seemed to fully click. And I even go back to the Florida State game. And so to bring it full circle, and I'm not trying to make this about Florida State, but I remember after the Florida State game, we discussed a quote at the time from Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson, after Florida State, basically said like, yeah, we kind of took him for granted and we weren't ready to play. And I was like, God, this is the same thing as last year. Like, what the heck is going on? How can you have that attitude for you? You've been telling us for 8 months that things are going to be different. Now you're telling me that you overlooked Florida State in week 1. No excuses. The old Wedding Crashers line, no excuses, play like a champion. And so I bring it up because Ty Simpson said something very interesting after the game that I do want to share with you really quickly. A couple things. Make sure you're following our Torres on Bama page. Torres on Bama, all your late-breaking Alabama news if you are an Alabama fan. With that said, Ty Simpson, after the game, here is his reaction to the win at Georgia. I believe Charlie Potter is the reporter who shared this clip on social media. Matt, play this out.
I just think, right, we had a chip on our shoulder. We know that we didn't play up to our standards the week 1. We just came back as a team, right, and we were like, all right, what are we going to do now? You know what I mean? Like, that's over. Do we want to be, known as the team who, doesn't finish, doesn't, sustain competitive stamina, right? Or we're going to play with our chip on our shoulder and, we said it all week, right? Us against the world. Like, us, when we walked in that, in Athens, right, between the hedges, it was us against a, bunch of Georgia fans, right? And that's the kind of mentality that we have to have throughout the season, right? It's Alabama against everybody.
That was Ty Simpson talking after the game again via Charlie Potter, who covers Alabama. I loved it. And I thought it was an important statement, again, in light of what he said. And it's not his fault. I'm not blaming him. But after Florida State, we overlooked him, we this and that. But what I loved about it was Bama against the world, but also what do we want to be defined by as a team? And again, to me, this is so much bigger than just a win at Georgia, because ultimately why this is so important, why this matters, is because I believe that this truly is a turning point for this program going forward. Listen, you can talk a big talk when you beat UL Monroe, when you beat Wisconsin, when you beat whoever about, yeah, things are different now and we're da-da-da-da, this and that. But when push comes to shove, when you're punched in the mouth, when you're on the road, when you're under the fire, can you really step up and respond time and time and time again? Nobody wins every game, but can you do it over and over again? And not only that, but is that your mindset going into games and when things, when crap hits the fan during games? And I think, there have been times, I would say, over the first 16 games of the Kalen Deboer era where I have felt like Alabama players have said things because they think it's the right thing to say rather than actually believing it. Well, darn it. For the first time in the Kalen Deboer era, I absolutely believe it. I think this program has turned a corner. Now, I'll say this. You go back to me last year after the Alabama-Georgia game, I would have said something similar, but you got a chance to prove it because what I will say, you do have Vanderbilt. next week. And Vanderbilt is all of a sudden, one, a very good team, and two, we obviously have seen the history, a recent history of Bama beating Georgia and then not coming out ready to play. But maybe I'm a sucker. Maybe I'm being caught up in the moment. But I really genuinely do feel like this is different for Alabama and that this is a different team and a different program and a different mindset going forward. Credit to Alabama for getting the win over Georgia. Really quickly, maybe not really quickly, because we got to have a conversation about the other side. I said the thrill of victory. There is also the agony of defeat. For people who are watching on clip form, the shorter form clips and not live, we just talked about Alabama. Now let's talk about the other side. Final score in Athens, Georgia, Alabama 24, Georgia 21. But we got to talk about it from the Georgia perspective. We got to talk about it from the Kirby Smart perspective, as Kirby Smart falls to 1-8 against Alabama during his time as the Georgia head coach. And I'll say this, we talked about why this win feels different for Bama than it did even a year ago. Well, this loss feels different for Georgia. It is crushing. It is devastating. You can see sad Kirby in the corner of your screen. So let's go ahead and talk about it from the Georgia perspective. And let me say this. I'll start this segment like I started with the Bama segment. For people who are not new to the show, who did listen to us throughout the week, I did pick Georgia to win because I bought the narrative of what Kirby Smart said. Kirby Smart early in the week was asked about Alabama, and he said, you're coming into this game, you're 1-7. What do you make of that? Blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, how many of those games were in Athens? And for those people who do not know, the answer was 0. Alabama and Georgia had played 7 games, whatever. I'm all tripped up on, is it 1-7 or 1-8? I keep getting mixed up. I think they were 1-6 coming in, so 7 games total against Alabama. All of them were played outside of Athens. So we had 3 SEC championship games, 2 college football playoff appearances, 2 games in Tuscaloosa, so 3, 2, 5. So 7 games total, 1-6, but 0 of them were in Athens. And so when I look at this game, I sat there and said, they're going to Athens. It's personal. They don't get a lot of night games. They have a 33-game home win streak coming into this game. There's just no way that they lose. And so why this is so devastating, listen, in a 12-team college football playoff era, we know that no single individual game is crippling. Listen, I don't want to speak for Georgia fans. I do wonder if coming into the season, you sat there and you looked at September and said, can we get through September at 3-1, whether it's a win at Tennessee or a win over Bama at home? And you can't win all of them, not in this world of college football. But this just feels devastating because this one was supposed to be different. And I was thinking about this on Saturday night watching the game, is you can go back to the other 7 matchups prior to this one. And I think there was always kind of a built-in excuse, if you will, if you want to call it an excuse or a reason for Georgia to not come out on top. And this one just didn't have it. I mean, think about all the other games that these two teams have played. And by the way, I'm not saying that losing doesn't hurt, okay? But conversely, you sit there and you look at it, and early on, it's, well, Nick Saban's the GOAT. Then it's like, well, Nick Saban pulled this rabbit out of his hat, putting Tua in instead of Jalen Hurts. Then there's the weird punt situation with Justin Fields. If we don't do that, maybe we win. Clearly, look, they did beat Bama to win a national championship, so you can't take anything away from it. It makes the loss in the SEC championship game that year sting a little bit less. And so I only bring it up because it just felt like there was always a reason, always a justification. Even last year, night game, Tuscaloosa, Alabama plays out of its mind. And oh, by the way, even last year's game with Alabama and Georgia, you could argue Georgia was the better team about the final 35 plus minutes of that game. Alabama, what was it, 28-3 was the score that they jumped out to. And it was like, once you got past that first about quarter and a half, it was like Georgia was probably the better team. I think that's what also makes Saturday so frustrating, is there are no excuses. There are 0 excuses for a couple reasons. 1, you're back at home. 2, you know how much this game meant. And 3, you knew that Alabama was reeling. And I think what the shocking part was, it was the opposite of what I just said about Alabama. It wasn't just that you lost, but there was nothing fluky about it. There was no weird injury. There wasn't some missed call late in the game. There wasn't some, should have been a targeting and it wasn't called. Like, yes, there were spots where everybody missed everything. But as I said with Bama kind of dictated this game from start to finish, and Bama kind of controlled it from start to finish. Now, it's not that Georgia didn't have a chance to win the game. It's just that Bama was really dictating the terms. And I go back to a couple things, that Caden Proctor play. Can you hold them before halftime? You fall down 14-0. You get back in the game. Can you hold them right before halftime? Can you keep them from putting in that touchdown right before the half? I know Caden Proctor ends up getting in right before the start of the third quarter. The physicality that Alabama played with, the way that Ty Simpson, it was just so disappointing because, again, it's not just that you lost, it's that I know Georgia had chances to win late, but it doesn't change the fact that I thought Alabama dictated the terms of that game. I think conversely, we have to admit, I don't know what it is. I don't know why. Kirby's got a mental block with Alabama. Like, we can pretend, we can sit there, we can say it's not true. He does. I mean, I mentioned a few minutes ago the Justin Fields. Remember that SEC championship game? They're in complete control. He lines up Justin Fields, who at the time was his backup quarterback, as the H-back, or I guess the protector in punt formation. They snap it to Justin Fields. It gets stuffed, and it completely changes the game. It's like, there's just something with Kirby Smart in these games. By the way, Georgia fans don't want to hear it. I don't want to dismiss a national championship game, but Alabama was down its two best wide receivers in that game, including a guy that is currently one of the best wide receivers in Jamison Williams. And then you talk about just mental block in a game. What the hell happened on that fourth down play, early to middle of the fourth quarter? Listen, I'll say this for people who don't know. I host Fox Sports Radio Saturday nights, 11 p.m. Eastern. We do the national recap show, okay? And so I bring it up only to say, one, make sure to download the podcast. It's linked in the YouTube chat. Just download it. Be a friend. But then two, also, there's this, is that I actually had the sound down because we were about to go on air. It was probably about, 10:45 Eastern time when that play happened. We're about to go on air. I see it's fourth down. I see they're trailing by 3. And I just assume they're going to line up, kick a field goal, tie the game, and then we'll see what happens over the final, whatever it is, 13, 14 minutes. I think it was actually like 9 or 10 minutes, but you get the point. They're going to kick a field goal. They're going to tie the game. And then all of a sudden, I not only see them lining up for it, I see them get stuffed by LT Overton. And I was like, what the heck just happened? And again, I'm preparing for the show. I have the game on mute. And so I went to Twitter. There's a tweet out there of me basically saying, what happened? What did I miss? And in my head, I'm like, is the Georgia kicker hurt? I triple check. Was it really fourth? Was that fourth down? They could have tied the game with 12 minutes to go, 11 minutes to go, whatever it was. And they went for it on fourth down when they could have tied the game. It makes no sense. And it just proves to me that Kirby Smart has a block when it comes to Alabama. Why? I don't know. How do you get over it? I don't know. But if you can't win this game in Athens, listen, whatever you think about Kalen Deboer, whether you think he's going to be the next Saban and win a bunch of national championships, or whether you think he's a bum, the Husky Harsin, whatever, the bottom line is he's always going to have good teams. And by the way, I think Kalen Deboer is great for an Alabama fan that's watching this after the fact. But I just bring it up because he's always going to have great teams. And so at some point, it's going to come down to X's. You can't have a mental block against this guy. You're going for it on fourth down with 9 minutes to go and a tie, and when you can easily tie the game. And so there's clearly a mental block. And let me say this, didn't really love Kirby Smart's comments after the game. Now, I understand it's an emotional loss, first of all. As far as the field goal is concerned, I did find the quote after the game because I wanted to look it up this morning to make sure I didn't miss anything. And basically, I'm paraphrasing here. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but he said 10 times out of 10, I would go ahead and kick that, or I would go for it on fourth down. Let me see if I can find the quote really quick. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to find the quote because this one to me is just fascinating. I'm going to find the quote here. Give me 1 second. Because I couldn't believe he said this. So, okay, this is what he said about going for it on fourth down. He said, if we gained anything, we were going for it. We were going to kick a field goal if we didn't gain anything on third down. And then this is the part. He said, there's a thing called sequencing, which I don't know if he was trying to be condescending to the reporters, but he said there's a thing called sequencing where you sequence plays to try to set up and know what you're going to go for it. So we felt like we were going to go for it if we got anything, and we did. We got it down to 4th and 1, and that play has been successful for us. We run it earlier in the night and run it for a conversion, and we missed the block you got to make, and they run through it and made a really good play. This is the part that I mentioned. He said, I do that 10 times out of 10 in terms of going for it. The decision is whether you go for tempo or not, and we felt like the tempo had been really good. Kirby, maybe that's the truth. 10 out of 10? I don't know if you're trying to justify it or what, but you have a chance to tie the game. 9 minutes to go. You're playing a legitimately awesome team. Kick the field goal. But what I think was even more frustrating was what he had to say after the game, not about that play, but about the fact that Bama now has he's now 1-8 again, 1-7 against Bama overall. Let me see. They played 7, so this is the 8th game. So 1-8 against Bama at this point. He was asked about it. Didn't love the quote. We're going to play the sound half a second, Matt. I just want to set up. You can't really hear the question, but the question is basically, why are you having so much trouble against Alabama? Matt, you can go ahead now and play the sound again. The question is not great.
Against Alabama now, do you worry that that's maybe when you face Alabama, your schedule to play them again next year, that maybe starts to linger with this program?
I mean, what's everybody else's record against them? You got it? I don't either. Like I don't lose sleep over that, because those games have been like championship caliber games, right? And even when we play in the regular season, they've been. I just saw 25 scouts out there. They're all there to watch these teams play. So that's not going to affect me. Like I'm going to be happy and just go lucky if our team comes back and plays well. That's what I worry about. But it's just, we got to get better. And next year, it won't have anything to do with this year. Thank you, guys.
I don't lose sleep at night over Bama. Well, maybe you should, because listen, I'm not like Mr. just criticize everybody and Kirby Smart's over. I think Kirby Smart's awesome. I think he's won 2 national championships. He's maybe the face of college football right now. But you officially have a Bama problem, my man. If it's not making you lose sleep at night, you maybe should lose a little bit of sleep. And so I didn't love the conversation. I didn't love the fact that, what's everybody else? You're not holding your own standard to everybody else's. You're Georgia freaking football. You've won 2 national championships in the last, 5 seasons, whatever it is. It's not about what everybody else has done. It's not about what Mississippi State has done against them, or South Carolina, or Kentucky, or Arkansas, or LSU, or whoever. You're the Georgia freaking Bulldogs. Your standard is the best of the best. And right now, you're really good against basically everybody else, but against the best team in your conference over the last 15 years, you are not living up to that standard. So if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm mad about that quote. And listen, again, to be fair, this is a 12-team playoff era. Doesn't mean that you can't come back, finish 11-1, have all the success in the world, blah, 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 whatever. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be frustrated in the moment. And I think Georgia fans have the absolute right to be furious. By the way, it doesn't get any easier for Georgia either. I mean, it maybe does next Saturday. They play Kentucky. But then after that, you got to go to Auburn. Auburn will be coming off a bye. You have Ole Miss at home, which is all of a sudden just an awesome, awesome football team. So Georgia's got to figure some things out in a hurry. But if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm mad. I want my coach to be as mad about that loss as I am. And he said, I'm not losing sleep over Bama. Well, maybe you should. All right. You know who else is mad today? Penn State fans. We got to go ahead and talk about the Penn State-Oregon game. Great win for Oregon, but that's not really the story. Some shocking stats on James Franklin and his futility as Penn State head coach. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the big pig invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Auburn fans, we already know the freeze warning has hit the plains. Make sure to get your freeze warning t-shirts. Also, Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody, I am back. Good to be back. So tell you what, we're going to keep the conversation going. The chat is humming. I got a lot of Mark Stoops commentary. Maybe we get to that after the break. We'll talk about a lot of different things after we get to Penn State, Oregon. But with that said, and by the way, just keep dropping your questions and comments because we will be getting to them momentarily. All right. With that said, we do want to switch gears. We do want to get to the other big game that was I mean, listen, there was a lot of big games on Saturday, but there were two, just mega showdowns ending at the same time. Obviously, we just talked about Bama, Georgia. If you missed any of that, you can go back and check it out. We got to talk about Oregon, Penn State. Final score, Oregon in double overtime, the 30-24 win. By the way, we talk about an all-time crippling bad beat for those who had the under of 53.5 like myself. But it was not only a crippling bad beat for underbettors, it was a crippling bad beat for the Penn State Nittany Lions. And I got to ask the question that I know people in the chat are asking right now. If James Franklin can't do it this year with this team, is there any reason to think that they'll pretty much ever do it at any point? I think the answer is no. Listen, I got a lot of stuff wrong in the preseason, but I did not buy the Penn State hype. And for at least one day, I have been justified. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this game. First of all, listen, if you're an Oregon fan tuning in, I'm sorry. I don't want to dismiss Oregon going on the road, top 10 opponent. And listen, I know Dan Lanning has had his flaws, but that dude, man, he gets his guys to play so hard. They play so confidently. I was thinking about this with Oregon, and we're going to get back to Penn State in a minute. 4-0 since they joined the Big Ten against Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Not bad. I think the other story from the Oregon perspective, Dante Moore, we spend too much time talking about the negative stories in college football when it comes to quarterbacks. Arch Manning, how good is he? DJ Lagway's regressing, et cetera, et cetera. Dante Moore, I think, is a really cool story. Commits to Oregon, decommits, goes to UCLA, starts as a freshman, and enters the portal. That part, I don't care about entering the portal in 2025, but I think it would have been easy for him to just say, well, I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. And he says, you know what? I'm going to go to Oregon. I'm going to sit behind Dylan Gabriel. I'm going to get better. And when my turn is called, I'm going to be ready to go. He could have easily gone somewhere and demanded he be a starter. Instead, he is now, I think, actually, we'll have to check the updated Circa odds, which, by the way, we'll talk Circa here in just a minute, Matt. But I think he might be the Heisman favorite. We'll see what Circa has to say about it momentarily. But listen, as great as the win is for Oregon, the real story, I say this all the time, oftentimes the more interesting story is in the losing locker room. And in the more interesting story here is Penn State. This was the preseason, I think they were the national championship favorite, but beyond that, this had to be the year. You've come up short in so many big situations. You've come up short in big moments, but this was the year. Ohio State graduated all the guys. Michigan's going through this change with Bryce Underwood and whatever. Even Oregon lost a ton off of last year's Big Ten championship team. You brought back everybody, and it looks exactly the same. First of all, before we get to the James Franklin stuff, let's start with James Franklin, because even by James Franklin standards, this has to be the most crippling, the most devastating of all the losses. First of all, you're down 17-3, which we're going to get to in a minute. but you rally all the way back. You tie the game up at 17, force overtime. You have all the momentum. In overtime, you fall, or I guess you take the lead. Oregon ties it up, and I don't even remember. Whatever. I feel like I'm ruining this segment right now. But I bring it up because you had so many chances. I guess, yes, you took the lead. You could have won if you held Oregon score, or if Oregon doesn't find the end zone, you don't get it. But then Oregon scores but misses the 2-point conversion. So if you tie and you get the 2-point conversion, it's ball game over. You win the game, et cetera, et cetera. So you're down 17-3. You rally all the way to come back. And then conversely, it's still not enough. And so that's bad enough. What I would also say, what the heck is going on with this offense? And I'm so over Drew Aller, and it's not all Drew Aller's fault, but some of it is. Okay, listen, I mentioned this on whatever it was. I guess it would have been Thursday's show. I said Drew Aller is that 5-star baseball prospect that, when he lines up for batting practice, he's hitting 400-foot home runs, and he plays maybe the outfield, and he, runs like a gazelle, and he can track down everything, and he's got a huge arm that looks like Vlad Guerrero Sr., throwing guys out from the warning track. And then you put him in the batter's box in a real game, and he can't hit a curveball, and you're just like, all that talent for nothing. And that's Drew Aller. Listen, it's not all his fault. A conservative game plan didn't let him throw it deep, did throw it deep in the fourth quarter when they needed him to. I'm just so over pretending like this guy is anything other than what he is right now, which is not a very good college quarterback. We talked about it on Saturday's show, or we talked about it on Thursday's show, is that you can actually make the argument that coming into this season, they spent all the money in the transfer portal on wide receivers. They retained the offensive coordinator, second year in the system, that he had regressed, and that's exactly what he looked like. You know what else he looked like on Saturday night? He looked like every single big game Drew Aller has played since he started as Penn State's quarterback, okay? Final stat line from Drew Aller on Saturday night. 14 of 25 passing, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. I guess what? That sounds exactly like Drew Aller in every big game. 137 yards passing, 56% completion percentage, 5.5 yards per completion. I'm sorry. Until he proves it in a game that matters, I'm tired of hearing about him. He stunk against Notre Dame last year. He stunk against Ohio State last year. He was okay against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. But if you actually go back and look at the stats, he actually completed under 50% of his passes in that game. And so the great game that everybody was excited about, he threw 2 interceptions and actually completed 51% of his passes. I need to see it in a game that matters. I'm sorry. I'm over it. I don't know what else there is to say. But again, I think when it's all said and done, this comes back to James Franklin. And listen, I said it in the preseason. I said, I'm not buying this team because what was the narrative coming into this year? Well, Michigan in 2023, they used NIL to retain all their best players, and they won a national championship, and hail to the victors. And last year, Ohio State retained all their players, added more in the portal, and they won a national championship. But what did I say in the preseason? What I said in the preseason was this. The difference between Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State is the fact that they had big wins before the year that they won the national championship, and they just needed something to get over the hump, okay? And so you go back to Michigan. They had beaten Ohio State 3 times by the time that they eventually won the national championship. They had been to the college football playoff in back-to-back years. Ohio State, I've been critical of Ryan Day, but he basically beat everybody not named Michigan for all of these years in the lead up to last season. What are Penn State's great wins? They don't exist. And as a matter of fact, producer Matt, you could throw up that tweet from your boy Torres because I put this out there on Saturday. This is important. For anybody who picked Penn State in the preseason, where are the great wins? They don't exist. Okay, so you go back. James Franklin got the job in 2014, okay? This is now year 11. 2016 was that magic year where they blocked the field goal, they return it for a touchdown, whatever it was, against Ohio State, and they end up winning the Big Ten East at the time and then winning the Big Ten championship. In that season, they beat 2 top 10 teams, Ohio State and Wisconsin, in the Big Ten championship game. Since 2016, here is a full list of Penn State's wins over top 10 teams. Over top 10 teams. Not Ohio State, not Michigan. Top 10 teams. Top 10 teams. since 2016. This is now 9 seasons. This is their list of wins against top 10 teams. 2023, they beat Utah in a Rose Bowl. I was at that game. It was terrible. And in that game, Utah's quarterback suffered what we now know was a career-ending knee injury, Cam Rising. I don't remember all the details. I think Utah was maybe ahead when he got hurt. I could be mistaken. I don't want to dismiss a Rose Bowl win. But you beat Utah in a Rose Bowl where their quarterback suffered a season-ending and we now know a career-ending injury. The other top 10 win, Boise State last year in the college football playoff. Now, I guess a Penn State fan corrected me and said that SMU was technically a top 10 win in the college. Congratulations. Here are your 3 wins in the last 9 years against top 10 teams. Utah in a game where their quarterback had a career-ending injury, Boise State on a neutral field, SMU at home. I'm sorry. Not every resume is built like every other one, and that is not an impressive resume. It's not good enough. And so, oh, by the way, I looked it up this morning just to make sure that I had all my facts right. This is what Penn State has done in the last couple years since 2016 against Ohio State. Since Ohio State, let's see here. Let me see. I have the stats here. This is not the best segment by me. 2016, as I said. So 9 seasons. I just gave you the list of top 10 teams. They have now lost 8 in a row to Ohio State. Michigan, they lost 3 in a row to before the division stopped. They don't play Michigan every year now. By the way, the last time they played Michigan, let's never forget that Michigan ran the ball 32 straight times in a win, and now you're 0-2 against Oregon since they joined the Big Ten. So let's just do some mental math there. Ohio State, 0 for your last, what did I say? 0 for your last 8 against Ohio State. You are now 0 for your last 3 against Michigan and 0 for your last 2 against Oregon. So 2, 5, 8, 13. So 0-13 against the 3 teams that you compare yourself to in the Big Ten, okay? It's just not good enough. It's just not going to get the job done. And I'm sorry, I'm just not a believer in James Franklin. At some point, you got to win one of these games. And I think this is really, we talked about Kalen Deboer maybe having a program-defining win. This is in some ways a program-defining loss because this is the year, and I want to give Penn State fans credit. I think Penn State fans have actually been patient with this process. Well, we're here, and Ohio State and Michigan are right there, but we're not quite there. And then it was last year, well, we have a 12-team playoff. We couldn't get into the 4, but we'll get into the 12 and build some momentum, and you did. But now, this is the year. You have to beat teams that matter. You bring back everybody. I mean, I go back to the preseason prep work. You go back to it. Penn State returned their starting quarterback, 2 All-American running backs. They loaded up in the portal wide receiver, returned most of their O-line, returned most of their defense. This in a year where Oregon lost basically everybody off last year's team, where Ohio State lost everybody off last year's team. I know Michigan isn't on the schedule, but Michigan is playing a freshman quarterback, and guess what? Michigan's 3-1 with a win at Nebraska? So I'm just so over Penn State, and I don't want to hear it. Win a game that matters and come back to us. And I think this is such a defining moment in time because this was the year it had to look different. It's not just enough to be 10-2 and get to the college football playoff. You have to win games that matter. By the way, even if you make a run in the college football playoff, which we have a 11-year history that you're not capable of doing it because you'd have to beat actual good teams. Like, it's not just enough to get to 10-2, get the 7 seed in the playoff, beat the Big 12 champ at home, and then lose to Alabama or Ohio State or Oregon in the college football playoff. At some point, you have to win games that matter, and it's simply not good enough. I'm fired up today. I'm just disappointed for Penn State fans, man. I grew up in the Northeast, man. I want to see Penn State be good. But I think it's fair. Every question, every comment about James Franklin, I think is totally justified. You get paid $8, $9, $10 million a year. You've been given all the money in the world for coordinators. You've been given all this. Go back to what we were talking about with Ryan Day last year. With Ryan Day, I said, how many different coaches, if you gave them a $2 million offensive coordinator, a $2 million defensive coordinator, and a $20 million roster, which were numbers last year for Ohio State, how many coaches could beat Michigan, whatever? Now, Ryan Day, to his credit, was able to turn things around in the playoff and close the deal. James Franklin, you got to beat somebody that matters. Guess what? They go to Ohio State in a couple weeks, and they're going to lose that one too, because that's what Penn State does in big games. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're 49 minutes in, and we've talked about 2 games. We're going to come back. We'll talk quickly about the rest of a busy Saturday in college football. The chat is humming with Fire Mark Stoops stuff. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about Lane Kiffin getting the win for Ole Miss. Quick break. Be right back. What's up, everybody? It's AT, and I've told you before, when I'm on the road, when I'm podcasting, sometimes you end up looking like a slob. Look at me, mismatched socks. I'm wearing shorts. What am I doing? The folks at FioBox said, Torres, let's get you some fresh gear to look better when you're on camera. Well, what do you think? This is all part of the spring collection for FioBox. These jeans, perfect when I want to go to games, casual, serious, business casual, you name it. Got the quarter zip. And oh, by the way, we got this perfect zip. This is the perfect spring, summer zip that you can wear when you're out with friends. Maybe it gets a little chilly. Maybe it's a little chilly in the morning. Perfect for all occasions. So this is what I need you to do. If you like what you see, and you should, what I need you to do is visit FioBox.com. That's FioBox.com, FIOBOC. By the way, FioBox has a special promo code for listeners of the Aaron Torres pod. Use promo code Torres and get 20% off your purchase. Thank you again to FioBox. By the way, make sure that you're following them on social media at FioBox, FIOBOC. Thank you, FioBox. All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. A lot of ground to cover. Before we get there, we're through 5 weeks of college football. Week 4 of the NFL is about to be insane. I'm going to get out of here in a few minutes and go watch all the big games. But when you need to watch big games, you know where you got to go? Our hotel and casino partner, Circa Sportsbook, Circa Casino. Okay, so I've told you all about Circa, but bottom line is when you go to Vegas, you need to check out Circa Sportsbook, largest sportsbook in the world, best place to watch games. And I think especially in this era, we're going to pay all this money for Peacock and Paramount and streaming and NFL, Sunday ticket. You don't got to do all that. You just got to go to Circa Sportsbook. But here's the thing. Circa is not just in Vegas anymore. I know so many of you live on the East Coast. I looked it up actually the other day. Number 1 and number 3 states in terms of listenership, Kentucky and Tennessee. Well, guess what? Circa has just opened a brand new sports book on the border of Kentucky and Tennessee, Mint, Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky, not far from Bowling Green, Kentucky. And so if you just need a place on a college football Saturday, maybe you're a Kentucky fan and you just want a place to watch basketball because you're focused on basketball season, Mint, Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky, the Circa Sportsbook. Replica Sportsbook, best place to watch games. We'll be doing some shows from that casino here in the coming weeks. Cannot wait for all of that. Mint, Kentucky Downs, Franklin, Kentucky, the brand new Circa Sportsbook. Cannot wait. All right, man, we got a lot to talk about. Really quickly, we got a couple Fire Mark Stoops tweets, so you can just pick one and we'll go from there. But I want to talk about some of these other games, but since Mark Stoops is a hot topic in the chat, let's talk about Kentucky falling to South Carolina in that game. Hold on, I'll just find one. It doesn't really matter. Hold on one sec. All right, this one from El Peasy. Fire Mark Stoops. Start a GoFundMe for help with his buyout. $9 million a year to win 2 or 3 games a year. What a damn joke. First of all, let me say this. Couple of things. One, can we stop with the Kentucky is the best job in college football? That's such an insult to Kentucky fans. Listen, I'm not here to criticize other media members, but I saw Josh Pate say that again the other day on Cowherd's show. Cowherd asked him, what's the best job in college football? Is it Ohio State? Is it LSU? Is it whatever? And Pate said, it's Kentucky. You pay him not. And by the way, I like Josh Pate. I'm not trying to criticize. I'm not trying to be a hater. He's great at what he does. But can we stop with it's the best? No. It may have been the best job when Mark Stoops was consistently winning 7, 8 games a year, sometimes having 10-win seasons. But there is a standard that needs to be met, and Mark Stoops isn't meeting it right now. And so Kentucky fans are frustrated. I think what stands out to me about Saturday is this was the first time maybe of the Mark Stoops era. You look at Sam Pittman at Arkansas. You look at Mike Gundy before he was fired. You look at Deshaun Foster, even at UCLA, as small as that UCLA fan base is. There was anger with the results. I think what I saw from Kentucky fans on Saturday was apathy. And that's the scariest place to be. We might have to do a separate segment on that because Kentucky, they scored 10 points in the first quarter. They end up in this game. At one point they're up 10-7. Then there's the fumble recovery return. And then there's the immediate pick six. And it's just game over. And I can't tell you how many Kentucky fans I know that were just like, I'm turning off this game. I can't watch this anymore. And I'll just be quick on Stoops. I said this the other day, but I truly mean it. I think there's a lot of parallels with Mark Stoops and Mike Gundy. I think two things can be true. Because the only parallel is Mark Stoops doesn't say interesting stuff in press conferences. But I think two things can be true. Like Mike Gundy, Mark Stoops is the greatest football coach in Kentucky football history, at least in all of our lifetimes. I can't speak to what Bear Bryant did in the 50s, okay? It's also time. Mark Stoops will have a statue, like Mike Gundy has a statue, but it is also time. It's just, I think, again, that's the thing that I saw on Saturday. It wasn't even frustration. It was apathy because South Carolina was a team that when Mark Stoops had it rolling, you kind of dominated. I don't know what the stats were, but I think it was 4 or 5 years in a row. You beat South Carolina 6 out of 7 years, something like that. You've now lost 3 straight. South Carolina was coming off 2 back-to-back SEC losses. And this was a game that you thought and by the way, South Carolina's offense was abominable coming into this game. And I think that's probably the most frustrating thing is that I understand who Lenora Sellers is, but at the same time, I also don't think you can not acknowledge that South Carolina's offense was terrible coming into this week, and they kind of carved you up. Lenora Sellers, by far his best game, and I think that's kind of the disappointing part is we're at the point now where everybody is having a career game against Kentucky. It used to be the defense and the run game. Now the defense isn't even bailing you out. Kentucky falls to 2-2 overall. Not getting any easier. Next 3 games, at Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee at home. By the way, then Auburn on the road. You're 2-2. I think you're looking at 2-6 going into Florida and Tennessee Tech. Really quickly, Luke mentions us glazing quarterbacks in the media. And so I bring it up because 1, Lenora Sellers did look good. But 2, I think this is a good way to transition to Ole Miss versus LSU because, listen, was I guilty of glazing Cade Klubnik in the preseason? Absolutely. But I never really bought Lenora Sellers. I said with Arch Manning, I'm sorry, I need to see it to believe it. And I certainly never bought Garrett Nussmeier at all. Well, Garrett Nussmeier loses another SEC game. By the way, fun fact on Garrett Nussmeier, his career record as a starter in SEC games falls to, if my math is correct, 6-4 overall, 20 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. But let's talk about this game really quickly. First of all, not a surprise. We picked Ole Miss to win this game. We picked Ole Miss to cover. And I think the only surprise was largely how dominant Ole Miss was. 484 yards of total offense. It was a 5-point margin victory, but remember, they fumbled essentially on the 1-yard line driving in. And so I just bring it up because Ole Miss largely dominated this game. And so I don't think there's too much to talk about because I think transparently, is anyone surprised by the fact that LSU struggled in this game? LSU's offense is not good. Garrett Nussmeier is not good. I tweeted this out. I sent out a million tweets on College Football Saturdays. I'm just going to read you the tweet that I sent out about Garrett Nussmeier because I don't want to dismiss what Lane Kiffin did, but Garrett Nussmeier in SEC games the last 2 years, 6-4 overall, 20 TDs, 15 interceptions. Okay. LSU's offense is not good. Garrett Nussmeier is not an NFL quarterback. If he's an NFL quarterback, he's Chase Daniel, career backup, hold a clipboard and wear a hat. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. I've never understood the hype, and I'm not backing down. I know what people, he has an injury. I don't care. What was the excuse last year? Because I look at that LSU team. I'll say this. That wide receiver core is filthy, okay? Led, by the way, by former Kentucky Wildcat Berrien Brown. But they stink, and they're not good, and I don't think it gets any easier. With the way Alabama's playing, with the way Oklahoma should have John Mateer back, I think this is once again a 3-4 loss team. Defense is much improved. I think the offense is struggling. Very quickly, let's go ahead and give credit to Ole Miss. I think Robert earlier in the show said they can now suffer 2 losses and still be very much in the thick of things. I got to give him so much credit, man. You go back to our over-under win total. This is from Robert earlier. Says team in Oxford can now afford 2 more losses. They're going to the playoff. Robert, you never want to put the cart before the horse. I think you're right, dude. I mean, look at this schedule. They do have to go to Georgia and Oklahoma, but South Carolina at home is not good. Florida at home could be ugly. And then maybe the Egg Bowl is the deciding factor, but you still have the Citadel and Washington State at home on top of those games. And so you could lose at Georgia and Oklahoma and still make that college football playoff. Remember, Ole Miss has already played 3 SEC games and is 3-0. Obviously, you got to give credit to the quarterback, Trinidad Chambliss. Love that name. And I'll just say this, first of all, great story. We talked about him on Thursday's show. But, it was funny. I mentioned earlier I host Fox Sports Radio every Saturday. And the show before us, Martin Weiss and Monty Bolaños, Monty asked, is there a QB controversy? I don't think it's a controversy anymore. I just think Trinidad Chambliss is the better answer at quarterback. I expect him to be the quarterback going forward. And I expect Ole Miss, they fell short last year. I think they're making the college football playoff. Really quickly, couple more results I want to get to. One, by the way, as always, drop your comments. We'll get to even more at the end. No word on Sam Pittman as of 12:05 Eastern time, 11:05 a.m. Central. We'll react if it happens during the show. Couple other Big Ten results. I want to give Ohio State credit. I think Ohio State fans think that I don't like them because I've been critical of Ryan Day through the years. That was just an adult grown man win. Washington, I don't know if people realize they're not only 3-0, top 25 offense, top 25 defense coming into that game. And it's almost what I said about Alabama earlier. I never really felt like there was a moment where Ohio State wasn't going to win that game. I think Washington went up 3-0, but on the road, crazy environment, freshman quarterback making his first career road start. And it was just a professional win. Great win for Ohio State. I don't think there's much to add, but is it weird to say like I'm more impressed by this win than some of the wins that they've had in the past? Because some of the wins they've had in the past, last year they had 13 NFL dudes that got drafted. It was a team that was built to win last year. And I think all of us thought naturally they could take a step back. Well, they ain't taking a step back that I can see. They get the win. They improve to 4-0. And you look at the schedule, there's no Penn State on the schedule, or there's no Oregon on the schedule, excuse me. They get Penn State at home. By the way, don't play Indiana, who's now 5-0. Listen, I think this team is this team's going to Indianapolis. Remember, this team hasn't been to the Big Ten championship game since 2020. Even if they're to lose to Michigan, which I'm not trying to put that juju out there, but Michigan has won 4 straight, they're probably going 11-1. These are Ohio State's road games in the Big Ten the rest of the way. At Illinois, I'm sorry, I've seen Illinois, you ain't losing that one. At Purdue, and then at Michigan. That is the rest of the road schedule. I guess at Wisconsin too. So I guess it is a little bit tougher than I thought, but you got to give credit, professional win for the Buckeyes. Really quickly, another Big Ten result we got to talk about. USC going on the road, losing to Illinois. Final score 34-32. I'll be real. We were doing the instant reaction to Arkansas just getting boat raced and Sam Pittman, whatever, during this game. So it was a weird game because Illinois was up 31-17. I was focused on the immediate reaction. I come back into the room. USC's up 32-31. And then the only thing that I did see was Joel Klatt say, they should have run the ball, made Illinois use their timeouts. Well, Illinois gets the ball back with about 1:55 left. Basically just run the ball down USC's throat, kick a field goal. Listen, I don't think USC is as bad as everybody says they are. I think they probably are like an 8-win team this year. But conversely, the road record in the Big Ten is bad. Now, it's hard to go on the road. It's hard to travel. The schedule did them no favors. They played at Purdue a few weeks ago. That game was in a lightning delay. They probably didn't leave until about 9 p.m. Eastern. They then played the late game last week in LA, then had to fly out and play a 9 a.m. Pacific time start time on Saturday. But guess what? You knew this is what you signed up for. And now USC is, if my math is correct, if you include the Purdue win, they're 2-5 in Big Ten road games overall. And what's crazy is the 5 road games that they've lost in the Big Ten, They have had a lead in the fourth quarter of all 5 of them. At some point, you got to close them out. You got to beat somebody besides Purdue. This is US freaking C. And, kind of what I just said with Ohio State a few minutes ago, what I said about Penn State. It's not just that Lincoln Riley's making $10 million. That DC is making like $2+ million. We know how much the roster is making. You got to be better. You got to get some wins. USC, interesting schedule coming up. They return home this week, or they go into a bye, and then play Michigan. And then they play at Notre Dame, at Nebraska. I think the Nebraska and Michigan games are pseudo de facto college football playoff games where, like, I think the winner will be in good position. Like if Michigan beats Ohio or USC, I think they'll be in good position. USC can turn the corner, but they're going to have to go on the road and win some games that matter, something that they have really not done since they got to the Big Ten. The stat I saw, by the way, from the Bear from Fox Sports, USC 0-12 against the spread in games outside of California under Lincoln Riley. Now, I think that stat's off because they were an underdog against LSU. I only bring it up. What is it? 1-12, 1-11, whatever it is. It's really bad. All right. Lastly, I want to talk about one more topic. I want to talk about one more team that I basically, I haven't really talked about a ton. And I really probably haven't given the Big 12 the credit that it deserves. Texas Tech goes on the road. They get the win last week at Utah. They established themselves as the best team in the Big 12. But I continue to just be very impressed by BYU, who late on Saturday night, it was the last game going. I was on Fox Sports Radio. They get the win 24-21 at Colorado. Listen, I don't think Colorado is very good this year. We'll talk about them maybe another time. But I think this is an impressive win. I think BYU's quietly the most impressive, quiet 4-0 team that we have, okay? And when I think about BYU, a couple of things stand out. First of all, you got to go back to last year with BYU, because we spent so much time at the end of the season talking about Bama, SMU, Indiana, South Carolina. I still go back to last year, and I stand by what I said. I said of all the teams that got left out of the playoff, so Bama, whoever, I thought the team that actually would have given good teams the biggest fits was BYU. Had Jake Retzlaff as a quarterback. By the way, remember, they went 11-2 last year, 10-2 in the regular season. They missed out on the Big 12 championship game by a tiebreaker. They easily could have beaten Arizona State, who won the Big 12 championship game. They basically lost in the last seconds of that game. And the defense was elite. Top 15 defense in the country last year, physical along both lines. They destroyed Colorado in the bowl game. And I said, and by the way, they beat SMU last year too. Remember, SMU made the college football playoff. And so I said, look, I think they should have been more in consideration for the final at large. I think their resume kind of was on par with Alabama. No bad losses, a couple good wins, whatever. Doesn't matter. They didn't get in. But I think coming into this year, it was kind of like, the Jake Retzlaff stuff happens over the summer. They lose a starting quarterback off an 11-win team. We don't have to revisit that. But I think everyone just kind of brushed them off, and you kind of look at the Big 12 picture, and you kind of sit there and say, like, man, Utah and Texas Tech and Arizona State and maybe Baylor and maybe TCU. And we all kind of forgot about BYU. And it's like BYU is pretty darn good. Okay, so first of all, let me say this. There is a very listen, I think this is actually the best story in college football that nobody is talking about. Their quarterback situation with Bear Bachmeier. Okay, so again, Jake Retzlaff was in the program. BYU fans, I'm not trying to bring up negative stuff, okay? But over the summer, honor code violation, is offered a 7-game suspension, decides to, and he didn't enter the transfer portal, but he left the school, okay? He's now at Tulane. And so I bring it up because, again, when he is lost, I think everybody's like, what the heck are they going to do at quarterback? Well, they have this kid named Bear Bachmeier who transferred in May. Okay, so remember, Stanford had the coaching change. So I know I'm all over the place, but this is such a good story. Stanford has the coaching change in February. Bunch of their players hit the portal. In late May or early May or whenever it was, Bear Bachmeier and his brother Tiger Bachmeier, yes, these are real names, decide to enter the transfer portal. And I think my understanding was when Bear Bachmeier entered the portal, it was come to BYU, be the backup. This was before the Jake Retzlaff stuff happened. And then, if things go well, you're the starter in 2026. Well, the Jake Retzlaff stuff happens. He ends up winning the starting job in fall camp. But again, I'm guilty of it. It's like, even if he wins the starting job, it's like, what does it really mean? What is BYU ceiling with a true freshman at quarterback who, by the way, two things on Bear Bachmeier, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but one, it's not like he's some generational prospect. It's not like Trevor Lawrence showed up or whoever, Tua showed up or whatever. But two, he showed up in May. It's not like when Trevor Lawrence enrolls in December or January and he's starting by October, that's different than a dude who showed up in May, who showed up in June and is now leading BYU to a 4-0 start. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say it's the most impressive run in the history of college football. And I think even BYU fans would acknowledge it's not the most impressive run in the history of college football. But 2 road wins, including an SEC, including a Big 12 opener, But how about this? This is the stat that blows me away. Bear Bachmeier, true freshman, and he has 2 road starts now. They won at East Carolina, which to me was low-key maybe one of the more impressive wins of last weekend because you're coming off of a bye. You're playing a true freshman on the road. East Carolina is good defensively. You fly cross-country before your Big 12 opener against Colorado. And I think my thought was that just has upset written all over it. By the way, I know it sort of had upset written all over it because Circa Sportsbook had it as a touchdown spread. Anyway, Bear Bachmeier goes on the road, gets the win. Then Saturday he gets the win. But Matt, pop up the tweet that I sent you about Bear Bachmeier, okay? So this is a crazy stat. True freshman, 2 road wins. This is from BYU Stats, man. Says, I guess I'm not just a businessman, I'm a businessman. Well, he's a BYU Stats man. He says, quote, no BYU QB ever has had 10 plus TDs and 0 giveaways through the first 4 games of a season. How about that from a true freshman playing in the Big 12? Remember, BYU didn't play in the Big 12 until last year. 4 games started, first BYU starting quarterback to ever start 4 games in a row to start the season with 10 touchdowns and 0 giveaways. And so that's insane. By the way, as producer Matt reminds me, we do have our Torres on BYU account, Torres on BYU, for all your late-breaking BYU news. Make sure you're following there. But then also on top of it, I think what's also impressive, and this is the part that we got to talk about, defense is, again, the real deal. Crazy part is defense didn't even play very well on Saturday, and here are still the stats for the defense. Top 10 national defense overall in terms of total defense. In terms of scoring defense, it is the number 4 scoring defense in college football through a third of their season, giving up less than 10 points per game. You cannot run the ball on this team, although I know Colorado had some success. 8th in the country in rush defense, and oh, by the way, pretty good against the pass as well. That's the place that it's a little bit of an area of weakness. But again, when you're talking about a team that has a top 10 defense, a quarterback that does not give up the ball, and a defense, by the way, that once again creates a ton of turnovers, 7 in 4 games, that is the recipe for a team that is going to compete in the Big 12. Now, I know there's a lot going on in that conference. I know that Texas Tech has established itself as probably the best team in that league, and I know that it's not going to get easier. You have Utah at home in a few weeks. You have on the road at Texas Tech. You have Iowa State on the road as well. And, of course, on top of it, TCU to end the regular season. So you play most of the best teams in the conference. Again, at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, TCU at home, and, of course, the rivalry game Utah at home. But to me, it doesn't change the fact that right now, this second, I think it's one of the best stories in college football. We'll see if BYU can maintain it, but they go on the road against Colorado. And I think the most important part, they didn't play great, and they still find a way to win 4-0. True freshman quarterback who showed up in late May, early June, expecting to be the backup, and they just win, baby. They just win. Again, Big 12 is wide open, but as my old radio partner Arnie Spander used to say, Torres, the show is tonight. Well, the show is today, and today BYU looks like a legitimate contender in the Big 12. All right, I'll tell you what. We have done an hour and 14 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. If you're not subscribed to Aaron Torres Pod, make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music. By the way, Samaris says BYU was written off in the preseason. I'm guilty as hell of doing exactly that, of writing off BYU in the preseason. I just kind of, when I did my Big 12 preview and picks, I liked Utah, I liked Texas Tech, I liked ASU, kind of forgot BYU. Daryl Turner brings up something interesting. BYU QB, Maryland QB, Notre Dame QB, Ohio State QB are all balling as freshmen. Let me say this, man. I'll say this about BYU, about the freshman core. We spent so much time, and I include myself, focusing on the negative about quarterbacks, focusing on Archman and Garrett Nussmeier, DJ Lagway. There has been good quarterback play. It's just not from the guys we expected. Shout out Ty Simpson. Shout out Julian Sand. Damon Williams didn't look good against Ohio State's defense on Saturday, but that's because of Ohio State's defense. Credit to those guys. Credit to Bear Bachmeier. By the way, we actually have a lot of BYU comments. Daryl says, I told you, BYU, the Cougars are no joke. And he also says BYU has a nasty NFL caliber defense. Well, listen, people think that I'm getting hyperbolic about BYU. So I don't know if the BYU is ready to play the Chiefs or the Chargers, but they certainly do look good. I think that defense is going to keep them in games in the Big 12. And again, it goes back to what I said a minute ago. If you have a quarterback that does not turn over the ball and a defense that is elite, you're going to be in every game. All right, we're going to get out of here. Before we do, one last something that we got to talk about. And that's, what that is. That's our friends. That's our partners. Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so I've told you all about Collie Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. It's that time of year, and you need a snack that is healthy but delicious. You need something that your kids are going to love, something that you're going to love. And as you sit on the couch and watch 12 hours of college football on Saturdays, 12 hours of NFL football on Sunday, you need a snack that is delicious but isn't going to make you a filthy slob. You need Collie Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But the best part is they taste delicious. For more information, this is what I need you to do. Go to ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com, ColliePuffs.com. You can also search Amazon.com. Amazon.com. You can find them there. But if you use ColliePuffs.com, get 15% off any purchase. ColliePuffs.com with the promo code Torres. All right, we're going to get out of here. Mainly because I need a voice for the rest of the week. We got a lot of shows to do. We ain't slowing down. College football is ramped up. College basketball is now like 3 weeks away. We got to get out of here. By the way, Sam Pittman could be fired at any time. If you're listening, we'll lop Sam Pittman on at the end. We'll have a 2-hour podcast at the end, but we'll see what happens at Arkansas. Time to go. Time for me to watch some football. Shout out to Torrin Craig, Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, UF at Unblock Me, bro. I'll be back Tuesday morning. Great episode of the Aaron Torres